Peter Thiel, the billionaire venture capitalist and PayPal co-founder, has a theory about how the Antichrist could actually take over the world. His idea is that the Antichrist wouldn't rise to power by being obviously evil or by inventing some terrifying machine. Instead, he'd rise by constantly talking about Armageddon, using our fear of global catastrophe to convince people to trade away their freedom in exchange for peace and safety.
Peter Thiel is not afraid of the Antichrist. Peter Thiel is afraid of himself, and his lectures are, unconscious to himself, his autobiography. So Peter Thiel recently delivered a series of closed-door lectures to Catholics in Rome about the Antichrist.
Thiel points to 1 Thessalonians 5:3, where peace and safety is described as the actual slogan of the Antichrist.
Is this so preposterous, what I've just told you, as a broad account of the stagnation that the entire world has submitted for 50 years to peace and safetyism? This is 1 Thessalonians 5:3. The slogan of the Antichrist is peace and safety, and we've submitted.
In his view, this is basically the opposite of the old sci-fi trope of an evil genius building a doomsday device. People aren't scared of that kind of villain anymore. Thiel thinks the more realistic candidate for this role in our current world is someone like Greta Thunberg.
It's the opposite of the picture of Baconian science from the 17th, 18th century, where, the Antichrist is like some evil tech genius, evil scientist who invents this machine to take over the world. People are way too scared for that. In our world, it's far more likely to be Greta Thunberg.
At the same time, Thiel co-founded Palantir back in 2003 during the height of the War on Terror. Palantir is a government contractor and data analysis company, and it's named after the Palantiri, the seeing stones from Lord of the Rings that let people spy on distant places and, in the story, get manipulated by Sauron.
Sauron, Lord of the Earth.
The company builds tools that let governments pull together massive amounts of data from different sources and search it for patterns. In the first half of 2025 alone, Palantir brought in more than $322 million in government contracts, and the company is now worth over $400 billion, with more than half of its revenue coming from government work. Palantir's technology is currently used for things like facial recognition and predictive policing. ICE uses mobile facial recognition to track immigrants and tie their identities to information stored in government databases, and some of that data is managed by Palantir. The concern raised by people like former CIA analyst Patrick Eddington is that immigrants and foreigners often become the first testing ground for surveillance tools before those same tools get applied more broadly to the general population. Eddington studies the surveillance state and has written about how these systems tend to expand well beyond their original stated purpose. This isn't a new pattern. Back in the early 2000s, DARPA ran a program called Total Information Awareness, which aimed to build a centralized database for tracking terrorists.
It's what Palantir is now. It's what they were literally trying to do, is come up with the ability to ingest, data from pretty much any source and then run that against, their de facto target list.
Public backlash eventually got the program defunded in 2003, the same year Palantir was founded. Even after being defunded, the underlying program didn't disappear. It got rebranded under the code name Basketball and was eventually absorbed into the NSA, the same agency that Edward Snowden later revealed was collecting the phone records of millions of Americans and intercepting web traffic without the knowledge of the companies involved.
The NSA specifically targets the communications of everyone. It ingests them by default. It collects them in its system, and it filters them, and it analyzes them, and it measures them, and it stores them.
There's a longer history behind this kind of expansion too. The FBI's COINTELPRO program in the 1950s and 60s started out targeting the Communist Party, but eventually expanded to surveilling political dissidents, including Martin Luther King Jr. and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. According to Eddington, hundreds of thousands of people were targeted over the course of that program. The broader argument made by economic historian Robert Higgs in his book Crisis and Leviathan is that governments have historically used crises, real or manufactured, to grow their power and reduce individual freedoms, and that this pattern repeated through the Great Depression, both world wars, and after 9/11 with the war in Afghanistan, the invasion of Iraq, and the broader expansion of the surveillance state. Thiel himself has expressed concern about a related but different risk, not authoritarianism from any one side of politics specifically, but the possibility of what he calls a bad singularity, a one-world totalitarian state enabled by advancing technology.
I always think that if we're going to have this frame of talking about existential risks, perhaps we should also talk about the risk of another type of a bad singularity, which I would describe as the one world totalitarian.
He's also stated that he has more reservations about AI than about other technologies, even though he describes himself as generally pro-acceleration and pro-tech.
That AI is communist. It's not completely inherent in it, but it's a certain tendency in it. And while I am pro-acceleration, I'm pro-tech, I'm even pro-AI.
Palantir's CEO, Alex Karp, has defended the company's work by saying its goal is to make sure these tools stay in the hands of what he considers the good guys, and Palantir did provide its technology to the Ukrainian military free of charge.
We were asked if we were willing to supply our product philanthropically, basically, for free, and I was very in favor of this because our primary mission is, in fact, to set a global standard for the world for behavior. I believe that Western institutions and the West are a superior way to live, and we've fought for that.
Co-founder Joe Lonsdale has described the company as being built around civil liberties from the start, arguing that its systems are designed to control exactly what data any given user is allowed to see, and that this creates accountability through audit logs showing who accessed what and when. The counter-argument is that historically, the main source of accountability for surveillance programs hasn't come from internal audit trails, but from external whistleblowers like Snowden or leak organizations like WikiLeaks.
The whole core of Palantir was basically a civil liberties engine from the start. It's what data are you allowed to see in what context? And how do we bring that together and show you only what you're allowed to see to let you get your job done?
Snowden himself has argued that governments are moving toward using AI-enhanced surveillance not just to fight terrorism or immigration, but to more broadly shape and influence behavior. He describes previously liberal open societies as now working to roll back those same liberal protections, using new technology to nudge, influence, and ultimately exert more control over their populations, believing this represents a better path forward.
Are now some of those working hardest to roll it back, to bureaucratize, to influence, to nudge, to shape, to ultimately control each and every individual within their territory and beyond.
Snowden has pointed to end-to-end encrypted communication tools in cryptocurrency as ways to protect human rights and privacy through technical and mathematical means that governments don't directly control. But even those tools face pressure. The French government arrested the creator of the encrypted messaging app Telegram for running an unlicensed encrypted service.
The chief executive of the messaging app Telegram has been arrested by French authorities. Russian-born Pavel Durov was detained at Bourget airport near Paris. Representatives say there was a warrant for his arrest as part of a French investigation.
And the US government has prosecuted the creator of Tornado Cash, a tool that lets cryptocurrency users anonymize transactions. Even in the AI industry, this tension around privacy keeps coming up. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman has said that people should have the same expectation of privacy in their conversations with AI as they would with a therapist, and has expressed concern that companies could be legally required to hand over sensitive user conversations in the event of a lawsuit. He's acknowledged this wasn't something anyone was seriously discussing even a year prior, and that there's currently no clear legal framework for how this should be handled.
I think we should have like the same concept of privacy for your conversations with AI that we do with a therapist or whatever. And no one had to think about that even a year ago. And now I think it's this huge issue of like, how are we going to treat the laws around this?
So look, my niggas, I'm not saying Peter Thiel is personally raising the AntiChrist in a server room under Palantir headquarters, but that's honestly not really the point. The point is that whoever eventually shows up promising humanity peace and safety, whoever that ends up being, is going to inherit a set of tools that has never existed at any other point in human history. So whenever we see that a guy will come on the world stage promising peace that everyone's already begging for, it might be too late, but nah, I'm just fucking with y'all because this whole video is just a theory and I love my life and I'm not suicidal. But anyways, my niggas, if you fucked with this video, make sure to subscribe and check out these videos on the right.